Here's the start of another E46 M3 rear axle carrier panel repair and reinforcement process, sometimes known as a subframe repair. This one's quite an individual one, Dakar yellow, only the second Dakar yellow one we've ever had here over the years, so quite a unique colour. And we've got quite a few things to do on this one. So we've got the repair and reinforcement on the rear axle carrier panel. There's a crack on that left rear mount point, a couple of spot welds in the side panel by the shock absorber, and there's a little crack above the right front mount. And the customer's also specing a full poly bush kit from Powerflex. So that's subframe bushes. I wouldn't even list them. It's absolutely every poly bush you can get for these. Plus a diff seal and quite a few powder coated items as well. So taking a chance to tidy some of these axle pieces up. Not many of them are corroded because this one's had an oil leak, has coated this diff carrier, but that's going to be replaced along with the rear anti-roll bar, upper rear arms, some camber arms, diff cover, and a V-brace I think it is. So this is the start of the process. We'll get stripping the car down now. We've removed the rear axle, fuel tank, prop shaft heat shields, under trays, things like that on the E46 M3, the Dakar yellow one. We're carrying out the subframe repair and reinforcement process. So to take the fuel tank out, but we've already identified a few cracks even before degreasing. So we need to get all this black dirt off just to confirm where everything is. But got the typical hairline crack there on the left rear mount, a little bit of spot weld flex, and interestingly both rear bolts that go into the rear mounting bushes of the subframe, both of them were bent on the ends, which is really unusual. See if I can grab one to show you. Let me try and focus on them. Yeah, just slightly bent, both of them were, which is very unusual. And this one here, this stud is also bent. It's going to be hard to probably see whilst the camera is shaking, but if you try and look at this vertical stud as I unwind it, you see the kink there heading off over to the right hand side. Very odd that that is bent. So we've got 3 studs that need changing. Probably got a hairline crack around that bolt there because of the corrosion. We've definitely got the hairline cracks on the spot weld going up vertical and going horizontal across the front section, and probably a little crack around the mounting of that stud as well. A couple of spot welds which are showing flex, which may have broken. Looks like we've got a tiny hairline crack in the fold right in the middle of the screen at the moment. Hard to see with the dirt on there, so we'll degrease that and show you better later on. And then we've got a couple of spot welds on the roof of the floor near the spring perch. That sort of shadow black circle in the middle of the screen now is a definite spot weld break. Possibly one in a whitish sort of circle over here, but that one there is where the floor has dropped very slightly. A couple of spot welds in the side panel, and then also one at the front of the what we call the roof section. Again, hard to see in this light before degreasing it, but there is a crack coming out of that spot weld, and definitely a spot weld break with quite a few cracks coming out of that one there, which is by the right front spring perch near the fuel filler neck and the brake pipe for the right rear circuit. So those ones are only achievable by drilling out and replacing the plug welds if we take some seam sealer off inside the car. So we need to go up inside the car next, have a look inside, see what we've got going on in the cavity mounts, see if there's any cracks in these rear cavities in what we call like the box section area where these threaded mounts are, and also underneath the back seat area where these threaded mounts disappear into. Time to Boroscope camera check the internal cavities in this Dakar yellow E46 M3. So we know it's got hairline cracks underneath on the bottom of the rear axle carrier panel. We'll be using the Redish Motorsport V2 reinforcement plates to strengthen and reinforce those mounting points under the car, but we also need to check internal cavities. So using the Boroscope camera, going through this lower section, the left rears are all more problematic than any other corner, to be fair. So just checking. There's a possibility of a hairline crack here, although it could be a hair, but I don't think we've really ever seen a hair inside of here. So there's a spot weld just at the bottom of the corner here, and is a possibility of a crack. I would imagine I would have seen it coming down this section as well, because that's a vertical and this is a horizontal, so there's a fold, 90-degree fold here. So we need to check that a bit closer and try and rub that, see if it comes off, to tell us whether there's a crack or not. This spot weld looks okay. There's one spot weld to the left of it which has got some black markings in it, which normally suggests there's a start of a hairline crack just starting around there. And even if those aren't cracks, then we do have a spot weld, a small spot weld breakage in the top left corner on the 3-panel connection. That spot weld there has got a crack all the way around it, and 2 cracks there going out to the edge of the panel. So it's not likely to travel anywhere, but it really needs to be addressed because there's 3 panels there that aren't attached to each other anymore, and also a crack, and you don't really want to leave any cracks anywhere at all on an E46. So we are going to need to take this corner off here. We can also see possibly the owner or previous owner has been having a look, see if the floor's moved here. This is how we found it. So there's a very slight gap, not much at all, but maybe 1 to 2 millimeters, just where the rear axle carrier panel's just started to drop very slightly away from this piece, which is the chassis leg. So it would be a great time to stitch weld this as well, and just relieve the sheet metal work of relying on spot welds to hold everything together. We can put stitch welds down that side, and then you don't want to leave a weak point, so we'd suggest stitch welding that side. Possibly look into this side as well and see if there's anything going on there. And now we'll go and have a look at the front internal mounts. We're now on the back seat area here. This is the seat panel. This is quite a flimsy panel, 0.75mm thin panel, which sometimes suffers with spot welds breakage down the side. And we've taken off a pair of redundant brackets that aren't used on these models, drilled a 20mm access hole to look at the cavity mounts, the 2 MIG welded points that are holding the front threaded mounts in for the rear subframe panel. We've noticed when we took out the Isofix connection that very rare, I have seen this once before, but once only, there is a hairline crack here. Finishes it back there and finishes over here. So where that Isofix mount, which is where your child seat adapters, there's no theory on this, but it might be cars that are using the Isofix adapters more so than others, but don't take that as gospel. Like I say, it's only the second car I've ever seen with a crack going through the seat panel right on the Isofix child mount bracket or seat panel area. So we need to address that. We've also need to take the seam sealer off on this seat slope panel. There's no guarantee, but there is rust here breaking through the seam sealer, which is very nice, neat seam sealer, and trickling down almost like a waterfall just here down the seam sealer. So I would imagine that there's a spot weld broken under there, and somehow it's broken through the seam sealer because of seat panel movement. And then we don't really need to Boroscope check in here because we can clearly see the cracks. They're not hairline, they're quite visible. They've got wax, dirty wax stuck in them, which is that black mixture. So a MIG weld's right in front of the middle of the screen now. If we try and focus. And then the cracks are heading around the right hand side of the MIG weld. One going left about 10 o'clock, one going up to about 11 o'clock. Going quite far, nearly got to the edge of the panel up there. And then it would probably be going down the front section towards the front of the car as well. Left other one, yeah, that one's got some cracks as well. And then on the other side, this one's got a very small crack at the top of the screen now. And that one's got quite a lot of corrosion in it. No obvious cracks at the moment, but we need to get rid of that corrosion because we all know what corrosion means on spot welds and MIG welds. It means that the panels have been moving because they're not supported strong enough, and the paint or the electrophoretic coating's been moved because of flex, and then moisture and atmosphere have been able to corrode it. So we are going to need to take some sound deadening pad off here, cut 2 access panels, and then address these cracks inside the cabin as well. Here's the powder coated items back for the 2 M3s that we're working on at the moment, the subframe repair and reinforcement. We've got Kawasaki green and also a ruby red metallic as well, and a black one for the one after, next week's one. Nearly all items removed, fuel system, brake lines, all things like that. We've just got to take the rear bumper off and install that, and then we can get going with degreasing these rear axle carrier panels and the wheel arch areas. We finished removing the interior items, wire and looms, rear bumper, door cards, all sorts of things to make sure that everything inside is protected as best as can be whilst we're working in there. So show you what it looks like when we strip them down. Like I say, so that there's no wire and looms, battery cables, door cards, nothing's going to get damaged with sparks, welding or painting, no overspray, things like that. That's what it looks like now. We've degreased the rear axle panel, battery tray, a little bit towards the rear trailing arm pockets, both wheel arches, and a little bit over to the fuel tank area. That's the area that we'll be working on, and the area we'll be painting. This customer has specified additional paint work, so that means out into the wheel arches, into the rear trailing arm pockets, battery tray, up to the back panel and into the fuel tank area. So we can clearly see the crack problem now. Got an interesting dent up here, which might be something to do with how we found that pin in here that was bent earlier in the video. Got a hairline crack around that mounting point. Got a couple of hairline cracks and spot weld failures on here, and a semicircle one around there. There's the crack and a spot weld failure up on the what we call the roof section. Another one there. Another two here where the panel's dropping away from the chassis leg inside the car. Then the left rear mount point, we've got the traditional crack here. Good spot weld movement. Those spot welds are broke, I'm sure of it. Possibly some chassis leg spot weld movement here we need to look at. Two broke up here, spot welds I mean, and a good sealer split to show the rear axle carrier panels on the move. And a little hairline crack on the right rear mount. Now all the dirt's clear, you can see it just here, going up into the seam sealer, and a little bit further down in this section as well. Some genuine BMW consumable pieces. We've got a sound deadening pad, which isn't in this picture, to go on top of the rear axle carrier panel in the boot. New battery tray carrier, bolts for the rear diff cover because that would come off for powder coating, so we need the Loctite gasket to bond that back on. Nuts for the battery tray. The 4 studs for the subframe because we noticed all of those had little bends in them. 3 bolts for the V-brace because that's being powder coated. Anti-roll bar has been powder coated with new bushes as well, so new brackets on the end and new socket cap screws for those locations. So just finished crack welding and plug weld welding on the front. We're just smoothing those down. Just thought to show you the backs as well. The repair work. This is before the reinforcement plate, so we'll go on to repair the other parts of the rear axle carrier panel separately later on. We're just working on the plate area at the moment, so after the stop drilling and spot weld drilling out, crack repair there, plug welds here, and there was 3 little cracks coming out of here, so they've been attended to as well. So we need to smooth these down now so the reinforcement plates can sit flat. I want to leave as much as possible, especially in this area, as that's the weakest point on this corner. So try and keep a bit of weld there, but also at the same time get it flat enough so that plates can sit flush as well. All the 4 mounting points and the 2 spacer plate points are cleaned, bare metal, and now I've got a weld through primer on them, so there's no bare metal once the Redish V2 reinforcement plates are welded on. So the weld through primer is on the back of the plates as well, again, so there's no bare metal at all. And we get going and bolt them up now and then get welding on. So the interior is protected quite well. We've got to do lots of welding and cutting and grinding and painting in the inside, so we've got all the glass covered at the back. Lots of systems over the centre console and the carpets. Full body shop BMW cover. Doors are individually wrapped, seats are double wrapped. Then there's another protection over that. All the apertures and entrances are cut and sealed, protected and sealed. And so we've got good clear access, all the body looms are out of the way. Everything's protected up to the front so we can get going and work inside. So we've got to do a few things. We've got not only the rear axle carrier panel welding, we've got a small hairline crack or a spot weld, I can't remember which it is now, but it's one of them in that side. We need to do some stitch welding down that side, seatbelt mount and Isofix small cracks which we've got to attend to, and then the customer wants us to do a full body or full boot paint, so that's what we call the extended paint. Normally we'd just paint the rear axle carrier panel and replace that sound deadening pad that we'd have to take off, but this car's got some corrosion in the sort of the boot floor section so we need to get rid of that, treat that, and see what's going on there. Same with the battery tray. So the bolt-in battery tray bracket is quite corroded down there, so we'll have to change that and the nuts because it's quite weak, and attend to the floor corrosion. And the same on the other side. This is what we call the module tray. So sorry the sun's a bit bright here, but we've already started taking these brackets off. This is the ones where the BMW54 and your CD changer and nav drive unit would bolt to, the cages, but it also doubles up as the rear exhaust hangers. Here's the M8 studs which drop through the chassis. So we drilled quite a few of those out already, and we had to do that to get to this panel because underneath this section, which looked good here, but underneath it, it's a lot of corrosion for some reason. Maybe it's had a light gasket or seal leaking. That's the bottom of it. Don't want to paint over that, so we've taken apart the panel work and we're going to address that corrosion, see if we can treat it, remove it to save replacing the panel. We'll see what we come up with next, and then we can get going with a paint system and replace these two panels, because you can still buy these from BMW. So we've done our corrosion removal now. It was decided that these boot floor panels aren't going to be replaced. There's still life in them yet, and obviously quite a lot of invasive work would need to be for this boot floor entirety to be replaced, with the battery tray, module tray and the boot section. None of these panels have holed themselves. They're pitted with corrosion, but we've got as much of that as we can. All the loose is gone, it's all vacuumed out. So now we're going to do the POR15 metal prep, which will coat this metal and also try and draw out some of the corrosion out of the troughs of the metal itself. So here's some of the metal prep by POR15, really good stuff. And we just want to wet this down for 30 minutes, continuously topping it up, keep it wet, and then that will be washed off later on. We've removed the cover plate now, the final part of the boot floor where it laps onto the rear axle carrier panel. Made a nice incision down there, removed 4 MIG welds down the side and drilled out I think 8 or 9 spot welds across the top. Just to access this broken spot weld, common one on the top, which you just can't get to because it's lower than the boot floor. So we'll drill that out as a 3-layer panel connection, the rear axle carrier panel cover and the rear axle carrier panel at a distance. We'll make it even better. We'll drill all the way through those 3 pieces of metal, because the Redish reinforcement plates are designed to come up to the top just past these spot welds, so that you can drill all the way through these like I've done at the bottom here, and then when we got the Redish reinforcement plate on the bottom, we can start our plug weld on the Redish plate and then bring it up onto the rear axle carrier panel, then the rear axle carrier panel box section cover, so that will connect it far better than a spot weld ever did. MIG welds are fine, no cracks. I don't think, we're still cleaning up, but no cracks coming up the vertical section, so we're just going to improve the connection through these spot welds, through those two as well. Same on the other side, no broken spot welds over here, but we'll improve it by going through here, clean all this cavity up and paint that after the welding's finished, then get that cover prepped and back on. Still need to take more sand deadening off on the back rear axle carrier panel top section, so we're going to do stitch welding down both sides and then some work in the front section on the back seat area later on. So we removed the battery tray redundant bracket on this M3, and we like to take these off because they're a massive corrosion trap. As you see, all the corrosion on the back of this bracket that looked quite good when it was on the car and you'd never be able to get to. It's quite layered, this corrosion, and it had actually made a hole under here, so we cut a section out that's affected, made a repair panel, got it in weld through primer, and I'm just about to get that welded in now to repair the battery box tray. So we're inside the boot area, or back seat area now. I'm sat on the boot back seat facing the boot, or the trunk. And you might think it's a lot of work to strip the car down, door cards off, you know, all taped up and protected, and seam sealer off and things like that. But we knew that we could see movement in this seat panel. This is the rear seat slope panel here. There's the edge of it. Rear axle carrier panel, chassis leg, seat panel goes off up here towards the tunnel. And we've got 3 clear problems here with all 3 spot welds. So it is worth definitely stripping it down, taking all the seam sealer off, inspecting these spot welds, drilling out the broken ones, stop drilling the cracks, and then not only plug welding all 3 of those, but also offering some stitch welds down the side. We've been doing that more and more as we're seeing these quite common coming up now. So we got a broken spot weld, totally broke there. two cracks going that way, one heading inboard as well into the panel, so we need to find the end of that. I might even continue it and take that section out, because then there's no crack at all. Broken spot weld with corrosion inside that one, and then also another broken spot weld with a crack going around it and two little offshoots inboard. So whilst it's all apart, then we're going to stitch weld the rear axle carrier panel to the chassis legs up here. And going over to the other side, this is a bit rarer, but I've seen it a few times. This is the Isofix mounting hole, one of them, and so this is where you would put your child seat, one of the two holes on the passenger side, and there's a crack going all the way across the top of it. So it starts somewhere around this point here, because bear in mind that thread is in the rear axle carrier panel, the one that's obviously getting all the loading from the subframe itself. So the crack is starting from the middle, we think, and then heading out, it finishes about there, and then going over towards the edge of the panel and finishes here at the moment. And I think we also noticed there was one crack in one of these spot welds. Yeah, this one up here has got a crack going out toward the edge of the panel. So we'll remove that and stitch weld all the way down the side as well. And all this, I should say, was underneath the seam sealer. If you look back to the video earlier on when I can't remember if I put this in the video actually, apologies if it's not in there, the inspection stage, but all we could see was a very, very slight corrosion mark to suggest one of these spot welds had broke or was showing signs of corrosion. There were no cracks visible through the seam sealer, because the seam sealer is like this, it's hugely thick, so all this can be underneath the car seam sealer and you wouldn't know until you took it all off. We've now cut access holes in the back seat panel, rear seat panel, to expose the front top two MIG welds holding the rear subframe front pair of mounts. These are the only thing that hold the threaded receiver to a sheet metal panel, and sometimes the MIG welds crack or get splits through the middle of them, like that one on the left. Several cracks going right through the middle of that MIG weld, and then sometimes the cracks are just down the side of the MIG weld through the sheet metal work down here and then going up that way, branching off a little shoot off to the right, one off to 11 o'clock. Same on the other side, not so severe. You see a section where the MIG weld was missed at the factory, so crack going forward, little one coming down the back. A lot of corrosion on this one and movement. I have to check that one a bit closer, clean all this off and see if there's any cracks. I don't think there is, I think it's just corrosion on that one. So here's the rear axle carrier panel, stitch welded to the chassis leg, and a little bit of the seat panel over here. And then we've stop drilled the cracks inside the cavity behind the rear seat panel on the front MIG welds for the rear subframe. Removed the two affected MIG welds and got down to the lower level where the threaded receiver is. The holes are the stop drills at the end of the cracks, and there's a weld through primer on there. You can just see one of the cracks coming out there, stop drilled on the end. So if you didn't have the stop drills on there, you'd really lose these cracks because you can't even see some of them, hardly there. So we're going to get new penetrated MIG welds into the lower threaded receiver, out into the sheet metal work, and then fill obviously the cracked holes as well. And then that's the other side, remove the affected MIG welds and we can get welding now. Here's the new MIG welds in the front section, and they are more penetrated than the factory ones. There's no gaps missing like the factory one was missing, a gap over here, and it's a hot temperature, I'm sure, wider, lower MIG weld, so they should hold the threaded receivers better than the factory ones did. Here's that panel. Now we've removed the corrosion, treated it. It's probably as best as we can get it with the time allowance that we've got, bar removing and replacing the boot floor panel, which we're not going to do, as we mentioned. So that's treated. Going to put a spare metal at the moment, so we're going to put a weld through primer on that shortly. And these are the new panel brackets from BMW. Remember, the old ones were really heavily corroded. There's no way we get them welded back on. So we've got new ones. These double up as the exhaust hangers as well for the left hand side of the rear. There's the studs for the exhaust, and it's also the module carrier, so here's where the modules go, like I explained in the video earlier on. Here's some of the areas partway through weld through primer, so we're going to be welding the trays on there. Going to be welding the cover panel back on, so that's got weld through primer on the back of the cover, which is just about to put on. So this is the area cleaned out, degreased, weld through primer. There's the spot weld that was broken that we changed to a plug weld, and then we drilled through a couple of others and then plug welded those. Same with these three down here, nice big fat plug welds holding on to the Redish reinforcement plate and then into the panels, and then a few stitch welds as well, and then the same down on that side down there. So we get going and put the cover panel back on and weld it on next. So I clamp down, weld through primer on the back of everything and on the panel, ready to weld. All the welding works, fabrication finished, degreasing, vacuumed, all panels back on, stitch welding complete, battery brackets back in, corrosion removed down on that battery tray, and now we're ready for etch prime. That's the etch primer applied underneath on all the bare metal surfaces, rear axle panel, battery tray, and a few other little points that we've removed corrosion from. So it's dried overnight, and we're now doing the cavity wax process. So that will drip dry for the next 30 minutes or so. That's that ambery brown colour which is coming out of, well, obviously the cavities. So it goes in through the bungs, and then we cap those, and it just sort of creeps around, does its thing and protects the internal metalwork. Some of that would have been burnt off when we did the welding, so it's quite an important step that this cavity waxing happens. So that's from underneath, and then we'll probably do some inside the boot section as well. Brake pipes we can start to put on, like you can see, and then next we'll be coming up the fuel tank. Fuel tank's installed, and we've been doing lots of other powder coating items. Customer specified diff carrier, diff cover, top arms, supplied some camber arms and V-brace and rear anti-roll bar. They're ruby red with a metallic clear coat lacquer, and Powerflex bushes in every single joint. Rear axle's now fitted with the new studs and the bolts. Good colour contrast, this ruby red metallic against the Dakar yellow floor. We've got the Powerflex bushes for the diff, new bolts for the rear diff, subframe bushes in Powerflex, trailing arm bushes Powerflex, upper arm inner bushes Powerflex, CA tuned customer supplied rear lower camber arms. I've done some ball joints. I think there was 3 ball joints it needed. Oh, a diff seal as well. Diff input seal was leaking, so we've done that. Here's the inside of the boot after the seam sealer and the Dakar yellow paint has dried. Looking nice and bright, probably the brightest one we've ever done, I think. It's really a good shine. So you still see a lot of the stitch welding holding the rear axle carrier panel to the other points, the cover panel and the old cut join line down there. The new carrier trays here, all nice and painted, both sides, and down in the battery tray as well, that was all corroded, so that's been treated and now protected as well with a textured finish, seam sealed finish. A few little bits of vacuuming and dust that we still need to get off, but it's looking nice and good right up to the back panel, so we can get going, put the sound deadening panel on next and start connecting all these looms up. Most items are refitted now underneath. We still need to put some rear arch liners on, double check over other items. Side skirts need to go on, and the aquaplane underguards. But most, like I say, most things are there. Looking quite nice. Lots of red, contrasting well against the yellow. Actually, turned out quite nice. Hopefully the customer's going to like this. So we've done the brake fluid bleed, and now we're going to get the wheel alignment sorted. Hi Jack, here's a video explaining about those camber arms you supplied, the CA tuned ones, and how they're not that adjustable once they're all fitted up. So car's looking awesome. Right hand side one, you can just about get to that nut there. You can't really get on it very straight, but you can just about get to it. And the other adjustment that's here. But on the left hand side, you've got the dual pipe exhaust system in the way. One nut is over there, but you cannot get the spanner up into that location. And by the time you come over at this angle, you're not on at 90 degrees, you're almost looking down it. So really big challenge to get this adjustment nut undone to set the camber correctly on the left hand side. That nut's obviously fine and easy to access, so that's what we're up against, just to let you know. So most boot trims are back installed, and that's the bright yellow finish, Dakar yellow. Look. Time for a snow foam wash to remove any atmospheric fallout from the bodywork. So work's complete underneath. We've done road test and wheel alignment, brake fluid bleed. I'm just fitting a few last clips in some of the side skirt locations. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of what we've done. We've done the Redish Motorsport subframe repair and reinforcement process, along with the internal cavity welding repairs inside the boot and behind the back seat. Extended paint out into the wheel arches and all through the boot system, corrosion removal and some battery bracket changing as well. A full Powerflex bush kit to include subframe bushes, diff bushes, rear trailer arm bushes, front control arm bushes, front anti-roll bar bushes, rear anti-roll bar bushes, rear upper inner bushes, and then lower control arm ball joints with the customer supplied CA tuned camber arms. Then we've got powder coated subframe. All this was done in ruby red with a metallic clear coat lacquer. So we've got rear subframes, rear diff cover, rear anti-roll bar, V-brace. Luke's just coming into shot there, fitting a few pieces on the side skirts. Diff input seal was leaking, so we've changed that for a new BMW seal. Rear braided flexi hoses from Hell in red. Brake pipes have been cleaned up and cavity waxed, and that was about it really. So quite a complex, long, big process, but a dramatic change and a nice difference visually and mechanically to drive. So that's the job complete. Subframe repair and reinforcement with additional paint, internal paintwork, lots of extra welding inside the cabin, corrosion removal, loads of subframe bushes, all the Powerflex bush range, and lots of powder coated items, brake lines. Oh, it's been lots of ball joints, loads, as you remember from the video previously. So that is complete. We've done a 12-mile road test, carried out wheel alignment, and the car's had a clean and check over, and now the customer's here to take that back home.